The village bakery was small, but known far and wide as the best in the area. People came from everywhere to buy bread. There were some who were not so fortunate and could not pay. One such person was an old woman who stood outside the bakery door with her tin cup containing a few coins that tinkled and rattled around. She never had enough to buy bread, so she was content to just stand and smell the bread. Although the baker was a prosperous man, the sight of the old woman annoyed him, and he often told her, "Move on, get out of the way. You may not stand here. You're blocking the door of my bakery. You're blocking my paying customers." But the old woman just rattled her coins and replied, "I have only a few coins, and I don't have enough to buy. And all I really need to do is to stand here and smell the bread." Well, the prosperous baker said, "All right, I'm going to take you before the village council," and that he did. And the village council agreed that she needed to pay for the smell of the bread. Now the old woman appealed to the chief of the village, and the chief said, "Well, perhaps I better hear both sides." The baker said, "This woman stands in front of my door, rattling her coin, smelling the bread, and she ought to pay." And the old woman said, "But I don't have very much money, and I am perfectly satisfied to just smell the bread." Well, the village chief thought on that for a while and then pronounced his judgment. "Since the baker has heard the sound of the woman's coins, he has been paid for the smell of her bread." Now, this old folk tale has many, many versions, and tales similar to it are told in cultures all over the world. No matter how it's told or who the characters are, the message, the moral, the lesson is the same. An imaginative mind can overcome many obstacles. Storytelling is a way to stimulate, wake up, prod, grow, develop an imaginative mind. With storytelling, a person or group can be educated, entertained, and empowered to find and claim their place in the world. Look at challenges, concerns, problems from different perspectives, and then develop creative solutions. Help and support others to realize their own potential and to learn, use, and celebrate the lessons of culture and heritage. Storytelling is an oral tradition embedded in every human culture. Before there was any technology, there was the human voice. Everything that needed to be learned or mastered was passed on orally. All the history, legacies, myths, legends handed down through generations were related in stories which made the lessons memorable and lasting. As a performing storyteller, I'm called Auntie Beverly, and I usually tell African and African American folk tales, stories, and fables to all generations of audiences in different settings. I aspire to be a teller of universal truths, to provide emotional depth by the way I tell, and to bring wisdom of the ages to these troubled times. I truly believe there is a story for almost every situation. And if I look long and hard enough, I will find it, learn it, tell it. So let's get down to some basics. First, what is a story? In the simplest form, a story is the relating of an event or events which may be true or real or may be fictitious, told in a sequence of beginning, middle, and end, but not always in that order. There are characters, a plot, the setting, maybe some conflict, a resolution, a moral, a point, a lesson. It can be written down and read, in which case the reader is limited to the words on the page, but still must bring their own imaginative mind to it, or it may be related orally by a storyteller who uses vocal dynamics, facial expressions, gestures and movements, instruments or props, and maybe an enriched vocabulary to provide that emotional depth I mentioned earlier, to make the story memorable. Storytelling incorporates rhythm and rhyme, repetition, call and response, movement or gestures, and interactions which may involve audience conversation and participation. I will share with you some ways storytelling can be used to educate, entertain, empower, with excerpts from one of my favorite stories. We'll start with education. With this topic, I like to focus on the gaining of new knowledge, finding a deeper understanding of what is already known, and developing literacy, social, and emotional skills. That isn't everything, but it is a start. I'll begin with the story called Salif the Tailor. If you were to travel east from the Twin Cities by car, bus, train, or plane to New York, and then take a ship or a plane and continue east a little, and then south across the Atlantic Ocean, you would bump into the western part of the continent of Africa, Dakar, Senegal. Will you say Dakar, Senegal? In Dakar, Senegal is a large market. It's bigger than the Mall of America. It's spread out over blocks and blocks, as far as the eye can see. The buildings are not very tall, and the streets are narrow and crooked. This is the world-famous Sandaga Market. Will you say Sandaga Market? You can buy any and everything there, from an abacus to a zither. Say you're looking to buy some new clothes, then you would follow one of the narrow and crooked streets until you came to a small tailor shop with a sign that said, Salif the Tailor. Now let's stop here for a minute. I hope you noticed the embedded geography lesson, which may be a review for some or an introduction of new information for others. Nowadays, when I tell this story in schools, there is almost always someone from the continent of Africa. And we get to talk about where they have come from and where their home country is in relation to Senegal. There's also opportunity to compare and contrast the concepts of market versus shopping mall. But let's get on with the story. So Salif is the most famous and sought-out tailor in the Sandaga market, so people who want things made bring him fabric. For instance, a gentleman wanted a suit made, and the fabric that he brought in was brown as the African soil. Let me see you do that and say that too. Here we go. Brown as the African soil. And Salif made him that outfit. But he took a little piece of that brown fabric and he put it aside in his basket. Then a lady came in and she needed a dress. And the fabric that she brought in was green as the leaves on the African trees. Let me see you do that. Green as the leaves on the African trees. And Salif made her that green dress, and he took a little piece of that fabric and he put it in his basket. Then a family came in with a little girl who needed a party dress. And the fabric that they brought in was blue as the African sky. Let me see you do that. Blue as the African sky. And he made the dress and he put the piece away. And then a couple came in. They were ready to get married. And the fabric they brought in was white. It was like white, puffy clouds. Let me see you do that. White, puffy clouds. And he did that. And then a dad came in with his son who was going to school, and he needed a shirt for his school uniform. And the fabric that they brought in was yellow as the blazing African sun. Let me see you do that. And so Salif did that. Now, every time someone came in, he put a little piece of fabric in his basket. Well, one day he took one look at that fabric basket and he said, I think I can make something beautiful out of this. So he sat down and he took his scissors and he went cut, 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 cut. Let me see you do that. And when he finished that, he sat down to sew. But he did not use a needle and thread. He did not even use an electric sewing machine. He had a sewing machine with a platform on the bottom. He put his 2 feet on that platform, and they went up and down, and he went sew, sew. Let me see, do that. Well, now, although there were opportunities to learn new things in this part of the story, the element which is most prominent here is entertainment. This aspect of storytelling is the most fun because it provides a respite from stress, troubles, and tensions and allows for vicarious experiences without any suffering. Many Anansi the Spider stories and Uncle Remus's Brer Rabbit tales entertain us by appealing to our inner child, allowing us to just have fun. Many of these tales help us to see diversity of expression and experience the emotions of joy, peace, wonderment, while sometimes having a good laugh. Now, I know you want to know what happens next in the story, so I will get on with Salif the tailor. So, well, he cut and he sewed and he made himself an outfit called a grand bouba. Will you say that? And as soon as he stepped out of his tailor shop, his friends took one look at him and they said, "C'est magnifique." Let me see you do that. Which means it's magnificent in French, because in Senegal they do speak French, in addition to Wolof and Fula and about 5 or 6 other indigenous languages. So the outfit was worn everywhere. And then it got tattered and torn, and Salif thought he'd have to throw it out, but no, he loved the colors. Remember the colors? Here we go. Brown as the African soil, green as the leaves on the African trees, blue as the African sky, with white, puffy clouds, and yellow as the blazing African sun. You all are very good. And so he took out his scissors and he did cut, 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 cut. And when he'd finished the cutting, he did the sew. And when he was done, he had a little shirt. That shirt's called a dashiki. Will you say dashiki? And he wore that everywhere, and it wore out, and his friends looked at him and they said, "Say yes." And then he said, well, it got tattered and torn. He threw it away. He went through all that process again, and he ended up with a little hat called a kufi. Will you say kufi? And that kufi was beautiful. He took a step out. His friend said, and when he was done, it was all tattered and torn, and he said, I'm going to have to throw it out. So he went one more time with all the colors, and he did all the cutting, and he did all the sewing. And when he was done, he had a little story, the one that we have just told together. Okay. Now, even with this shortened version of the story, I hope you learned a little bit of French, got the idea that repetition is the key to learning, that your imaginative mind can evoke images of places you've never been, and you realized that materials and ideas can be reused, the entrepreneurial spirit can be developed, cultural information can be communicated, and you can even be a part of the storytelling. Audiences from preschoolers to senior citizens love the entertaining aspects of this story, and I've had many great conversations about it. Even though the stories I tell are based in African and African American culture, that doesn't mean they lack broad appeal. Many stories can be adapted to suit any interest. Maybe it's hip hop, Shakespeare, Tyler Perry, jazz, country western, opera. It may take a little doing, but almost all tastes can be accommodated. But a story that makes you feel as if you can do anything, that you have the ability to reach and surpass your goals, or that you have the wisdom of the ancestors pushing you forward with love, is perhaps the most powerful tool of storytelling. Stories which empower teach lessons that transform and transcend generations and gender. These are the stories that storytellers hope are repeated most often, the ones that stick in the memory and are called upon just when needed. The story I know as Fly, Eagle, Fly is just such a tale. It is another one of my favorites and fits the empowering bill perfectly. When my storytelling colleague Teju tells this story, I laugh so hard it brings tears to my eyes. If you've heard Notando Zulu tell it, you were lifted right out of your seat. Oba William King brings the spirit of ancient Africa to his interpretation. However, each teller is relating the story of an eagle who spent some time thinking it was a chicken and how eventually its full potential was realized. As we realize our potential, we become better people, and we see ourselves with the ability to make the world a better place. Using the tools of storytelling to make the world a better place allows us to uplift as we are uplifted. Then we begin to see connections within family, community, and the global village. So what can you do to put storytelling in your life and the lives of others? Well, you can collect and tell family stories. Talk with old folks. Write down their stories or capture them on video and audio, because after our loved ones are gone, you can tell and retell the stories so the wisdom of their lives is used and not forgotten. Read and tell stories related to your own and other cultures. There are many books. Get a bunch of them. Keep looking until you find those you really like. Then learn the stories and tell them to family and friends. Volunteer at schools and nursing homes and shelters and jails and daycare centers and community gatherings and tell the stories you like. People will listen. Create your own stories and then tell them every chance you get. Storytelling has a tremendous power and ability to educate, entertain, and empower. I have learned to love doing it, and you will too. So, in a small village in Ethiopia, a young and very poor boy got a job watching the cattle of a very rich man. This man was also vain and very boastful, and he embellished every story he told about his wealth, his accomplishments as a hunter, and his ability to survive in the coldest of mountain conditions. One day, when the rich man was being especially boastful, he promised a bag of gold and a small herd of cattle to anyone who could survive one whole night on the cold mountain with only a small blanket. The poor young boy accepted the challenge, and that evening set out for the mountain with only a small blanket. The rich man thought surely the boy would return during the night, or not return at all because of his death due to the cold. Early the next morning, the shivering and tired boy walked through the lifting fog to claim his prize. Well, the rich man was surprised and asked how the boy was able to survive the whole night in the cold with only one small blanket. The boy explained that during the darkest part of the night, he squinted his eyes and could just barely see the orange glow of a shepherd's fire on a mountain across the valley. He kept his eyes on it and dreamed of being warm. Well, the rich man was angry and said the boy could not have the gold or the cattle because looking at a fire on the mountain is the same as building a fire, and now you're out of a job and you must leave my employ tomorrow. The boy sadly went to bed, and the rich man ordered the servants to prepare a feast for himself and his guest. They did as they were told, and many tasty dishes were prepared. The smell wafted throughout the house, and the rich man's stomach began to rumble in anticipation. He ordered his musicians to play their instruments, and they took them up, but did not touch the strings, so no sound was heard. After a great while, a servant came forward and said, "Master, I hope you have enjoyed the fine food and the beautiful music." The rich man bellowed, "We have had nothing to eat and have heard no music." The servant answered, "But master, you smelled the food all evening. You surely imagined the sounds of your favorite music. Was that not enough?" "Enough?" growled the rich man in anger. "What kind of person thinks that the smell of food can fill a man's stomach and the dream of music can make sounds in his ears?" And the servant respectfully answered, "The same kind of person who believes that looking at a fire across a mountain can keep a small boy warm." Oh, that rich man was not pleased. But the next morning he did indeed give the poor boy a sack of gold and a small herd of cattle. The boy tended his own cows and grew to become a kind and generous rich man himself. This last story, as with the first, teaches a great lesson. An imaginative mind can overcome many obstacles. Storytelling is the key to developing an imaginative mind. It is a skill we can all learn and use.